Good morning, everybody. I am the Cynic. It's that time of year again where people condemn we Scrooges and Grinches of the world for not indulging our pity and guilt by giving to the needy. In a previous video, I spoke about the Scrooge Contagion effect, the effect in which the businesses that offer cheaper goods and services at the expense of the workforce and ethical business practices garner support from the consumer, while the more friendly but expensive businesses are foregone and left to die out. The contagion, in this case, being the consumer's own greed and desire to stretch their dollar to gain as much as possible. Concern for the conditions of their fellow man becoming more and more non-existent, as people's greed ultimately leads to the cheaper but less friendly businesses thriving, and the newer businesses coming to see the cold, tight-fisted methods of running their organizations yields better results than treating their employees like family. I suggest watching that video before watching this one, but it's not necessary. The link may be found here. As one would expect, people don't like to suffer, even if that suffering is brought about by their own greed and complacency. Many like to espouse virtue ethic theories as to why the people should not have to face the painful consequences of their decisions. To most people, the idea of the inherent goodness of humanity trumps any consequences or suffering that the collective has earned for itself. Is the very reason capitalism is hated and becoming more and more demonized in the Western world. These are the same people whom look at the hand which bears the standard flag of right and wrong, and see only that as their guide in life, how things ought to be, or how things should be, if you will. Painful consequences to them have no place in the world, only pleasurable ones. Alas, while one hand bears the standard of determining what ought to be done in terms of quote-unquote right and wrong, our other hand bears the chains of what we shall do in cause and effect. The chains of reality that bind us to the consequences of our actions and keep us from the mystical utopia of shoulda, coulda, woulda land. And so, not wanting to face the consequences of their decisions as the demand of the market and the responsibility of having to choose businesses that voluntarily treat their employees as decent human beings over those that treat them as lessers but offer cheaper products, the people pass said responsibility onto the government, who, in turn, made regulations so that the consumer may indulge their greed and not suffer the guilt or real-world effects. Well, not immediately, anyway. We all know the government isn't a tool of the people, but a puppet of the wealthy. Regulations were put into place to force corporations and profit-driven entities into a standard of treatment in terms of wage, work hour influence, child labor, anti-discrimination, and safety concerns. Now, let me get this out of the way. Let's get this straight before I continue here. This isn't me saying I'm in favor of working people to death, both metaphorically and literally, nor do I endorse the lack of capital compensation or ethical treatment of the working man and woman. What I'm saying is that I don't support business owners who want to treat their employees like crap, but don't out of fear of government-induced violence. I mean, if I knew that a misandrist opened a restaurant in my city where she treats her male staff like crap, why would I want to put a smiley face over her hateful scowl and pretend that she was as good a business person as the owner of the diner down the street whom treats their employees well and voluntarily gives them benefits and a decent wage? I mean, it makes no sense. At least when people willingly take responsibility and accountability for whom their financial support benefits. Anyway. Yet people will go on and on about how such things shouldn't exist, despite the fact that such bigotry and indifference to suffering will always be there, and will defend to the death people going to that place of business so long as the mask of regulation is put over the hate and apathy for the sole sake of getting their lesser product. Responsibility is a bitch. Consequences are a bitch. And instead of dealing with both on an individual level, most people would rather just pass it off onto an entity larger than themselves so that they don't have to think and make the hard choices and sacrifices in life. Shoulda, coulda, woulda land is a much nicer and more forgiving place than reality. Unfortunately for these people, the painful consequences that drag on the chains of cause and effect will always be more real than the banner flag of morality that they use to guide them, especially when they hold that banner flag directly in front of their eyes and march forward towards a cliff. Regulations have short-term pleasing consequences, but long-term painful consequences. Many have argued against the Scrooge Contagion effect in that it punishes those not yet born with the decision that their ancestors and that the decisions were of their ancestors, and that it isn't fair that they be held to account for the choices made therein. To this I reply that life isn't fair. Never has been, never will be. Not real life, anyway. People may argue in favor of virtue ethics and how good people should be rewarded for good behavior and all that great stuff. But in the end, that's not the way the world works. In reality, that's not the way the world works. Reality and consequences are how the world really works. Results are how the world really works. Cold bitch that it is, reality doesn't care about the feels, and neither does consequence. Well, not until an employee is treated so badly that they come up and shoot up their place of employment anyways. At that point, feelings become very interesting to reality. But that's another topic for another day. To conclude, the world, the market, the business practices, they are nothing more or less than the will of the consumer, the will of the public, and the will of what the mass of individuals are either willing to put up with or not willing to stand against. Regulations don't support good business practices. They certainly don't curb bad ones if the consequences of supporting those businesses cripples the economy so badly that the people have to cling to whatever jobs they can get and suffer whatever cut corners the businessman decides to take. The banner of morality in what we ought to do will never be greater in its impact on the world than the chains of cause and effect. And that, my friends, is the result of the free market, voluntary association, and consequentialism. The chains of cause and effect are inescapable, no matter how unjust the effects may be perceived to be. I am the Cynic, everybody. Have a nice day.